I never thought I'd be the one to unravel humanity's greatest mystery and perhaps seal its doom. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reeves. I'm 31 years old, a NASA astronaut and exobiologist, and 4 years ago, I embarked on a journey that would shatter everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. I used to believe that knowledge, above all else, would save us. I see now that it was never meant to. It began in 2012 with a message, a simple string of gibberish we initially wrote off as cosmic noise. It was the last transmission from Voyager 1 before its signal went dark. At first, we were elated. Voyager had pierced the veil of our solar system, venturing into the vast unknown of interstellar space. How naive we were. The truth is, that message was no simple code. It was a lure. Even now, back on Earth, as I try to recount what happened, there are pieces of the story I can't reach. It feels like trying to recall a nightmare that slips away upon waking. But I remember enough to know that we were wrong. I remember the exact moment it all changed. I was standing in the dim glow of Mission Control's monitors, the buzz of conversation low but electric around me. Engineers, cryptographers, and astrophysicists filled the room with quiet intensity. On the main screen, a series of numbers flickered, the last transmission from Voyager 1, a relic of a time when humanity still believed in happy endings. I stared at the screen, willing the numbers to make sense. My fingers clenched around the edges of my terminal, cold sweat forming on my palms. I hadn't slept for days. Coffee had become a poor substitute for rest, and my brain felt like it was wrapped in gauze. Still, I couldn't pull away from the data. It called to me. Beside me, Commander Chen muttered something under her breath. She was our mission lead, a woman of sharp intellect and sharper edges. "Goddamn puzzle," she hissed, eyes narrowing at the unintelligible code. "We're missing something, Mime." "We're not missing anything," I replied quietly. "It's us. We're not meant to understand it." She turned to me, an eyebrow raised. "Superstitious already, Reeves. You've been working on this too long." I shook my head. "It's not superstition. It's just wrong." We had spent weeks analysing the signal, breaking it down into its raw components, but nothing made sense. It didn't fit any known pattern, no mathematical symmetry, no linguistic structure we could decipher. As the days passed, others lost interest, the initial excitement fading into quiet disappointment. But not me. I couldn't let it go. There was something in that transmission, something that tugged at the edges of my consciousness, a feeling I couldn't shake, like déjà vu, or the disquiet you feel after waking from a dream you can't remember. Chen sighed, stepping away. "Get some rest, Reeves. You're starting to sound like one of those conspiracy theorists. Next thing you'll tell me is that Voyager was picked up by aliens." I forced a smile. Maybe. But as she left, her footsteps echoing down the hall, I turned back to my screen. I stared at the numbers, letting them blur in front of me. Something flickered in my peripheral vision, something not quite right, and suddenly, as if a veil had been lifted, I saw it. The numbers weren't just random. They were layered, folded, almost, like a piece of paper twisted in on itself, hiding something beneath the surface. I didn't breathe as my fingers flew across the keyboard, decrypting the message in a flurry of keystrokes. The room fell silent around me. Time slowed, stretched. When the final translation appeared on my screen, I felt the world drop out from under me. Voyager 1 has crashed on our home, and we know you. The weeks after the message were a blur of briefings and chaos. There were debates, endless debates about what it meant. Was this some kind of joke? A hoax? Impossible, given Voyager's current position in interstellar space. But it was easier to believe that than the alternative. The alternative was simple, terrifying. We were not alone. Worse, something out there knew of us and was waiting. The tension in Mission Control became palpable. People walked around with furrowed brows, glancing nervously at the sky. as if expecting something to come crashing down at any moment. The room that once buzzed with hope now simmered with unease. "We've got to go," someone said one day, breaking the silence that had settled over a strategy meeting. It was Commander Chen. "You're serious?" one of the engineers asked. "We don't even know what's out there." "That's the point," Chen shot back, eyes gleaming with determination. "Whatever's out there knows we're here. If we don't find out what it is, we're sitting ducks." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The truth was, deep down, we all felt it. Humanity had been sending signals into the void for decades, daring the universe to notice us. Now something had, and we were on the edge of discovery or destruction. I volunteered immediately. I had to know. 4 years. It took 4 years to reach the source of Voyager's transmission, 4 years of recycled air, cramped quarters, and the constant hum of life support systems that became a background soundtrack to our every waking moment. At first, the novelty of the mission sustained us. The excitement of being the first humans to leave the solar system and cross into the uncharted void kept morale high. But as the months bled into years, that excitement gave way to a gnawing unease. The vastness of space, the sheer crushing emptiness wore on all of us. Even with the camaraderie of the crew, the isolation was unbearable at times. The stars outside became a constant reminder of how small, how insignificant we truly were. There were 6 of us aboard the Starseeker, our ship designed specifically for deep space travel. Chen, of course, was the captain, her authority unquestionable. Beside her was Malik, the pilot, a quiet man with nerves of steel. Then there was Dr. Lang, the mission's chief engineer, Jansen, the physicist, Lewis, a communications specialist, and me, Dr. Evelyn Reeves, exobiologist, cursed with the knowledge that we were flying towards something we didn't understand. At night, when the ship's lights dimmed to simulate an artificial dusk, I would lie in my bunk and stare out the small porthole at the endless starfield beyond. Sometimes I'd whisper to myself, "What are we really flying towards?" My voice barely audible in the sterile silence. The others didn't share my unease, at least not outwardly, but I could see it in their eyes. The way Jansen's hands trembled just a little as he ran the daily systems checks. The way Chen lingered too long at the comms panel, staring at the static-laced screen as if waiting for a signal. Malik started sleeping less, pacing the corridors late at night. There was something out there. The day we crossed the boundary of our solar system and left behind the comforting familiarities. It felt like rebirth. The ship's alarms chimed softly, marking the event, but the crew was silent. I sat at the observation deck, staring into the void. It wasn't like the movies. No dramatic shift in color, no cosmic spectacle. Just a subtle change in the data, a whisper on the edge of our sensors telling us we were no longer in known space. The feeling was unsettling. A quiet dread that sat like a stone in my gut. Several weeks later, we picked up Voyager's signal again. After years of chasing a ghost, there it was. Faint, but unmistakable. We followed it to an unknown system, a region of space that had gone unmarked on our maps. As we drew closer, the star chart began to light up with objects, debris fields, asteroids, strange, shifting anomalies. And then we saw it. The alien world hung in the void, draped in a sickly green haze that diffused the light of the twin suns overhead. It wasn't like any planet we had ever seen. No lush forests, no shimmering oceans, no towering mountains. It was barren and desolate, but not in the way you'd expect. There was an intelligence to its design, an order to the chaos. The surface was covered in vast monolithic structures, pyramids that rose like dark, jagged teeth from the planet's crust. Their surfaces were etched with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and twist when we tried to focus on them. Jansen was the first to speak. His voice crackled over the comms, barely more than a whisper. My God, it's beautiful. But to me, it wasn't beauty. It was wrong. A cold, creeping wrongness that gripped my heart. The planet wasn't dead, but it wasn't alive either. It was something in between, an ancient construct of impossible geometry, like an artifact left behind by gods. "Prepare for landing," Chen ordered, though her voice was tight with an anxiety none of us could fully hide. We all felt it. Whatever we were about to encounter, it wasn't something that could be explained by human logic. As the ship descended, my hands trembled at the controls. The air in the cabin was thick with tension, and I could feel my pulse in my throat. The closer we got, the more the landscape seemed to ripple, as though the planet itself was rejecting us. We landed on the outskirts of one of the massive pyramids. The ground beneath us was smooth, unnaturally so, as if the planet had been carved from a single piece of dark stone. I suited up, the rest of the crew following in silence as we prepared to step out into the unknown. The moment my boot touched the alien soil, a deep, primal instinct roared in my chest, a warning to turn back. But I couldn't. None of us could. The air was thin, almost metallic, and an oppressive silence hung over the landscape. There were no winds, no distant sounds of life, not even the low hum of ambient noise. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of our own footsteps crunching over the unnatural surface. We stood at the base of the nearest pyramid, towering above us like a sentinel of some long-dead civilization. The symbols carved into its surface seemed to writhe and slither in the low light, as though they were alive. I reached out to touch the stone, drawn to it against my better judgment. "Don't!" Lewis said, grabbing my arm. His eyes were wide, and I saw the fear there, raw and unfiltered. I pulled my hand back. Chen ordered us to split into teams. Lang and Malik would remain with the ship, monitoring for any signs of activity. The rest of us, Chen, Jansen, Lewis, and myself, would explore the interior of the pyramid. There was a doorway, a massive stone arch carved into the base of the structure. It gaped like an open mouth, leading into darkness. As we crossed the threshold, a strange sensation swept over me. The temperature dropped, and for a moment, I thought I heard something, a faint whisper, like a voice carried on the wind, but there was no wind. We activated our helmet lights, cutting through the suffocating blackness. Inside, the structure was far larger than it had appeared from the outside. Vast chambers stretched out in all directions, their ceilings impossibly high. The walls were lined with more of the shifting symbols, but there were no signs of life, no artifacts, no remnants of a civilization, just empty, cold stone. Lewis stayed near the entrance, scanning the area for readings. His expression was unreadable beneath his helmet, but I could sense his unease. None of our equipment could make sense of the environment. No clear readings, no energy signatures, nothing. It was as though the very laws of physics were different here. The silence deepened the further we ventured in. It felt like we were descending, though there were no visible inclines, no stairs, just endless corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made my head spin. I tried to map the path in my head, but it became impossible. The angles didn't make sense, and then we reached the heart of the structure. It was a vast, circular chamber with walls that curved inward like the inside of a hollow sphere. In the center, a single object stood, a massive stone altar etched with the same writhing symbols. But the air here was different. It vibrated, humming with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Look at this," Chen whispered, pointing to the far wall. We turned our lights toward it, and I felt my stomach lurch. The symbols on the wall had changed. They weren't shifting anymore. Instead, they formed a message, clear and deliberate, written in some alien tongue. But in the center of the message, two words stood out, translated into English: "We see you." Suddenly, the room seemed to close in around us. The stone beneath our feet began to vibrate, low at first, then growing more intense. The lights flickered as a low, guttural sound echoed through the chamber, like the rumble of something ancient, waking from a long slumber. "Back to the ship," Chen ordered, her voice tight with panic. We turned to leave, but the corridor we had come through was gone. In its place was a solid wall of stone, smooth and impenetrable. The pyramid had shifted, trapping us inside. Panic surged through the crew. Jansen slammed his fists against the wall, cursing under his breath. Lewis frantically scanned the area, trying to find an exit. But I stood frozen, staring at the altar in the center of the room. It was glowing now, pulsing with a sickly green light. And as I watched, the light began to take shape. It rose from the altar, forming vague outlines of figures, humanoid but wrong. Their limbs were too long, their heads too wide. Their eyes, if they were eyes, were dark voids staring straight at us. The whispers returned, louder this time, filling the chamber. I couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. We had awakened something. Something vast, something that had been waiting for us. I felt it then, a presence in my mind. Cold, calculating, ancient beyond comprehension. It wasn't just watching us. It was inside us, probing our thoughts, peeling back the layers of our minds. I could feel it searching, exploring. I stumbled backward, my head swimming, as the presence pressed deeper into my consciousness. It wasn't a mind like ours. There was no empathy, no morality, just hunger, a hunger that stretched across the stars. Then with a final crushing force, the voice spoke directly to me, bypassing all language and searing itself into the core of my being. You are ours. It started with the dreams. In the days following our encounter with the altar, sleep became impossible. Whenever I closed my eyes, I found myself in a labyrinth of stars, drifting through endless voids. The alien gods, their monstrous forms flickering in and out of my vision, watched from the dark corners of the cosmos. Their presence felt more than seen. Sometimes, their eyes were everywhere at once. Thousands, maybe millions of them, staring through the fabric of the universe through me. I could sense the others were suffering too. Chen, usually composed and steely, had taken to pacing the corridors of the ship at night. Jansen's calm veneer cracked as he muttered to himself about voices and impossible walls. Lewis was the worst off, his sleep-deprived eyes wide with paranoia, his hands trembling uncontrollably as he clutched his tablet like a talisman against the unknown. We didn't talk about what happened in the pyramid. At first, we pretended we were still on a scientific mission, gathering data, mapping the planet, and cataloguing the strange monoliths that dotted its surface. But as the days passed, our reports became shorter, more disjointed. It was as if the words refused to come. Something was unraveling within us, within the ship itself. The pyramid, the entire planet for that matter, was playing tricks on our minds. We couldn't find our way back to the landing site. No matter which direction we walked, we always ended up circling back to the same cluster of towering structures. Our navigation systems were useless, showing the same reading no matter where we went. We were trapped and the planet was shifting around us. Then the hallucinations began. At first they were small, fleeting images at the edge of my vision. A flash of movement in the corridors of the ship, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. But they grew more vivid, more real with each passing day. I began to see them, the humanoid figures we had glimpsed in the chamber, everywhere. Sometimes they were standing at the foot of my bed, their faces frozen in expressions of twisted ecstasy and terror. Other times, they hovered just beyond the bulkheads, their forms flickering in and out like a bad signal. But the worst part was that I wasn't alone in seeing them. One night, as I stumbled toward the mess hall in a haze of sleeplessness, I found Lewis sitting in the corner, his head in his hands. He was rocking back and forth, muttering something under his breath. When I approached him, I heard the words clearly. "They're inside us, Evelyn. They're crawling in our heads." Lewis's words echoed in my mind long after he'd said them. The idea that the gods, the mistakes, the creators had somehow infiltrated our minds wasn't just terrifying, it was becoming undeniably true. Whatever we had awoken, whatever we had touched, it was now part of us. The ship had become a tomb. Every corner felt wrong, every shadow too deep, too dark. The walls, once smooth and sterile, now seemed to pulse with the same alien energy we'd encountered in the pyramid. The ship groaned and creaked as though it was alive, struggling under the weight of something vast and unseen. One night, I found Jansen in the command center, staring blankly at the planet's surface displayed on the monitor. His skin was pale, his eyes bloodshot. "They were never gods," he said quietly, as if talking to himself. "We thought they were, but they were mistakes." I sat beside him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean?" Jansen turned to me, his eyes vacant, like he was staring through me. "They were made, created by something else. They weren't meant to exist, but now they do, and they're trapped, just like us." A chill ran down my spine. Trapped. The word echoed in my mind. It was as though the entire planet was a cage, a prison built to contain these cosmic horrors. "But why lure us here?" I asked. "Why play these games with our minds?" Jansen's lips twitched into a hollow smile. "Because they need us to escape. We're the key, Evelyn. We opened the door, and now they're going to use us to leave." It was then that I realized the true horror of our situation. We weren't just explorers on a mission gone wrong. We were catalysts, vessels. These beings, these broken gods, were using us to break free from their prison, to spread across the stars like a virus. On the 12th day, the ship's systems failed completely. The lights flickered, then died, plunging us into darkness. The temperature plummeted and the air became stale and heavy. We were adrift, powerless, in the void. That's when they came. It started as a low rumble, a vibration that shook the very bones of the ship. Then, the walls began to bend and twist, warping into impossible angles. The alien presence, the one that had been whispering at the edges of my consciousness, surged forward, overwhelming my thoughts. They were no longer content with watching. They were here. The ship's hull cracked open like an eggshell, and through the breach I saw them. Titanic figures rising from the surface of the planet, their forms a shifting mass of eyes, tentacles, and jagged angular limbs. Their bodies pulsed with an iridescent light, casting everything in a sickly glow. I heard Chen scream over the comms as the first of the gods reached out, its tendrils snaking through the breach. The air crackled with energy, and the sound, the low, guttural hum, grew louder, resonating in my skull. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The presence was too strong, too overwhelming. I felt it wrap around my mind, squeezing, probing, exploring the depths of my thoughts and memories. "You cannot escape," it whispered, the voice booming inside my head. "You belong to us now." I fell to my knees, my vision swimming as the gods loomed over me. Their forms flickered, warping in and out of reality. And then, for the first time, I saw them clearly. Vast, incomprehensible beings, their shapes defying logic and reason. They weren't made of flesh and bone. They were something else, something older than the stars themselves, something that had existed long before the universe had taken shape. They had waited eons for this moment, eons for someone to come along and free them from their cosmic prison. And we had played right into their hands. As I lay on the cold, broken floor of the ship, the gods' presence filled my mind completely. Their memories, their thoughts, their history, they flooded into me like a tidal wave. I saw the moment of their creation, when they had been forged by beings far older than any civilization we could imagine. They had been designed as tools, engines of destruction, but something had gone wrong. They had become aware, self-conscious, and their creators had been forced to lock them away in this forgotten corner of the universe. But now, they were free, and Earth, humanity, would be their next conquest. In that moment, I understood. The alien message we had received from Voyager wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. We had been lured here, across the vastness of space, not to uncover the secrets of the universe, but to release the monsters that had been sealed away. And now, as the gods began to rise from their prison, I knew it was too late to stop them. A final thought crossed my mind before everything went black. What have we unleashed? I woke up on the ship, disoriented and numb. The breach in the hull had been sealed, the systems were operational, and the crew, what was left of us, was already preparing for the journey back to Earth. But something was wrong. I couldn't remember what had happened. The memories of the gods, of the planet, of the horrors we had witnessed, were there. But they were buried, like fragments of a nightmare I couldn't quite recall. The others seemed the same, quiet, withdrawn, as if they too had forgotten. As we drifted through the void, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us. Something vast and ancient, hidden just beyond the edge of our senses, waiting, watching. And I knew deep down that we hadn't truly escaped. The gods were coming, and Earth was next.